Flashy girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, the podcast about The Nanny, a hit sitcom from the 90s starring Fran Drescher. I am Sean DePasquale, and I'm here with...
Toria Sheffield.
That's right, and we are back to discuss Season 5, Episode 5, The Ex-Niles, which is, of course, a play on The X-Files, a beloved show also from the 90s. This one was directed by Dorothy Lyman, and it was written by Jeffrey Hodes and Nasatron Debai.
Were these like the married couple?
Nastarin Debai. I apologize. Jeffrey B. Hodes and Nastarin Debai. Yes, they were a married couple, and they worked on this show. She, I believe, has gone on to work on the TV show Dear White People on Netflix and Resident Alien. And
she did Living Single, which I loved. So this is the episode where Niles quits. And I kind of think that there's another episode where Niles quits from what I remember in the series, but hey, I guess we'll get there. But this one starts off, we're in the kitchen and Mr. Sheffield accuses Niles of eavesdropping on his phone call with his accountant. And Niles denies it, but then there is paint on his face. And then there's also paint on Fran's outfit because basically the terrace just got repainted, which proves that they both had been listening to this conversation. But Niles at first, he's like, do you know how much work it takes to uphold this household? I don't have time to be skulking around snooping. And then Fran gets off the phone. She goes, Niles, it's the spy shop. Your night vision goggles are in. What a creep. And we then have this scene that I just thought was so cute because Niles and Mr. Sheffield leave sort of bickering and it's now just C.C. and Fran. And by the way, Lauren Lane getting more noticeably pregnant, but they're just playing it as though she's on a diet.
I meant to say like she I didn't notice it, I think, in the first two episodes when we discussed it. But in this episode, I was like, oh, yeah, she's definitely pregnant.
Yes, but they just keep having her be like, "This, I'm not losing any weight on this liquid diet."
Yep.
But in this scene's cute because so Fran's like kind of like eating a cake and coffee. And Cece just sits down right next to her and picks up a fork and starts digging in with her, which is just kind of very like familiar, friendly thing to do, which like,
yes,
well, subtle shows the shift in their relationship over the years. And while she's, eating with Fran, she's like, if I were Mrs. Sheffield, the first thing I would do is fire that lint trap butler. And Fran's like, Mr. Sheffield wouldn't marry you. Like, you want someone more exciting like me. And they sort of get in a little back and forth about this. And Fran's like, well, you know what? We should get an objective third party to really decide who would be better for Mr. Sheffield. Someone like Dr. Joyce Brothers. And Cece's kind of like, well, that's absurd. And she's like, no, I met her once and she was on Hollywood Squares. She knows a lot, which is true because it is true that Fran met her
she did meet her. Yeah. I had the same thought. I went, oh yeah, she has met her.
Yes. In the canon of the show, she did meet her. And the trivia for that episode was us talking all about Dr. Joyce Brothers on Hollywood Squares.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. And this also was this was silly because Mr. Sheffield has never shown any interest in Cece. So this is kind of an absurd plot line. It's very silly, but I was okay because I was like, I just love seeing Fran and C.C. subplot. So I'm willing to forgive the fact that this like really makes no sense in where we actually are in this show right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also thought it was interesting because I really genuinely was like, oh, I wonder how they're going to tie in Dr. Joyce Brothers to Niles quitting. And then was surprised when it has nothing to do with Dr. Joyce Brothers at all. That's a completely different plot line that happens independently of any of them.
Yes. And we cut to the next scene and Fran's getting off the phone and she's literally already arranged this Joyce Brothers thing. She's like, Miss Babcock, I just got off the phone with her. It turns out she wants to come over and observe us both with Mr. Sheffield. And she says she is, very fascinated by this experiment. And then Cece's like, she wants to pitch a musical to Maxwell, doesn't she? And Fran's like, yeah, she wrote a score for a play called Nuts. And then she's like, Fran's like, oh no, sorry. Cece's like, okay, well, don't tell Maxwell about this. Like, he's going to think we're total morons. And Fran's like, yeah, you're right. In fact, if he finds out, we'll tell him Val thought of it. and then she walks out to kind of bump into Niles, who is eavesdropping at the door. And he's just like, Miss Fine, how do you expect to explain Dr. Joyce Brothers' presence to Mr. Sheffield? Like, basically, how is he not going to know that this is happening? And she goes, Niles, the woman deals with the psychologically deranged. She could be here for me, Ma, Gracie. And she's like, and let me tell you, you're not far from the top of the list, mister. It's a very funny, way to explain it. And we then, in this kind of like ambling all over the place episode.
Yes, seriously.
We cut to Fran and Val in Fran's room, and Fran's applying for a new credit card. And we establish, well, she's applying for a new credit card because she wants to buy new clothes to, quote, impress Dr. Joyce, thinking that like if she looks classier, she might, Dr. Joyce might be more inclined to be like, you're the better fit for Maxwell Sheffield. And she ends up putting a higher salary than her actual one on the application form because she says that the last time she applied for a credit card and put her real salary, they, quote, sent her food stamps and a box of cheese.
Government cheese. They sent me food stamps and a box of government cheese.
Yes. And it's interesting just from like a kind of inflation perspective, because she puts down $50,000, and I looked it up. In today's money, that would be $93,700. So basically $94,000. So it would be a very good salary for a nanny.
Yeah, I think it was this one, or maybe it was it was this one, because at the end of this one, Elizabeth was like, "Oh, I don't get it though. Like, were they really fighting over that much money?" And I had to do the math we did on a previous episode and be like, well, actually, we looked this up, and yes, it turns out $50,000 would be like almost $100,000 now. So like that's a lot of money to get paid to be a nanny, and I understand why Niles was rightfully upset, because he's been working for Mr. Sheffield presumably since his teenage years and childhood.
Yeah, he is definitely taking care of a baby when he was a boy. So it's so sad. And then in the next scene, Niles comes into Fran's room to vacuum. Right. And I just wrote, my mom would be all about Fran's decor. Like, there's this floral comforter. It's like the bedrooms in my room growing up were like this. And he, of course, starts snooping because he's Niles. And he happens to see the credit card application and the salary. And his eyes like widen. And he then bursts into Mr. Sheffield's office. And he's just like, I demand a raise. And Mr. Sheffield is so fucking callous. He goes, Niles, I'm in the room. You might want to rehearse this somewhere else.
Oh, he's so such cool. A dick in this scene.
Oh my God. And then he goes, normally my answer would be no. But when you say it like that, hell no. And he's like, how dare you barge in here like this? And can't you see I'm working? And Niles goes, yes, I know how much effort goes into ordering an air-conditioned pith helmet from the Sharper Image. And Mr. Sheffield like hides the Sharper Image catalog he was just ordering. And when you Google pith helmets, like I didn't really know what that was.
What is a pith helmet?
Google it. It is so funny. So imagine Mr. Sheffield in one of these. They are so dorky. You'll know it. They're kind of like an explorer's hat.
That's so funny.
It'd be so funny.
Air-conditioned. It's even. Oh yeah, they are. They're like old-timey like explorers hats.
Yes, and a dweeby Englishman would like definitely wear it on a hot day.
Yes.
And then Niles like demands it again, and then Mr. Sheffield goes. This whole scene I loved. I loved their Mr. Sheffield's like, what exactly brought on this surge of greed? But the thing is.
It's funny because they write Maxwell here like he's Ebenezer Scrooge. Like he's like, how dare, this is outrageous.
Well, but he does then have a pretty valid point in the next couple lines when you're like, oh yeah, but just like their dynamic, they do fight like siblings, even though it is an employer-employee relationship, because he's like, what exactly brought on this surge of greed? And Niles is like, oh, I was doing some reading and I happen to know I'm underpaid. And then this is when I was like, oh, you know what? Mr. Sheffield has a valid point, because he's like, I happen to think you're quite well paid, considering the fact that you drink my brandy, smoke my cigars, and give secret tours of the house claiming it belonged to Jackie Onassis. And I'm like, I mean, he does have a lot of job perks and does take advantage of his job a lot.
True. True.
I guess it depends how much he's paid, to be fair. Because, like, can he save money for retirement? If not, then he's underpaid.
Right. That's right. It's like, if he's just, like, you know, taken back, like, because he knows he's not being paid a lot, you know? So he's like, I'll take whatever I can get out of this terrible job.
That's true.
This dead-end job.
Well, I mean, but there's also been, I think, there's, in previous episodes, he has, like, cried to Dr. Miller, the therapist, about how he's like, Mr. Sheffield's so good to me, and yet I do all these horrible things.
I know.
We then get this hilarious lines of Niles' backstory where Mr. Sheffield's like, you know, if it wasn't for me, you'd still be performing on the streets of London with a ukulele and Larry. And then he goes, at least Larry treated me like a human being. And he's like, he was a monkey. So you're like, oh, did Niles go through a phase where he tried to be like a starving artist before going back into the folds of the chef?
And his partner was a monkey named Larry, apparently. It's so weird.
Yes, I love that. I can totally see it that, like, you know, maybe in like his late teens, early 20s, he tried and then like went back into the fold of the Sheffield household.
It's so good.
And
so
then
good.
And Max was like, well, if you hate it here so much, you should go. And he's like, well, I will. And by the way, someone called wanting to invest in your new show. And Mr. Show was like, oh, well, who was it? And he goes, it was. And then he just slams the door and leaves. And I think what's so funny is they bicker. It's actually not like siblings. It's like a married couple.
It's like a married couple. Absolutely it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Fran is like, upset. She's like, my best friend, which I thought was really cute and also pretty hurtful if you're Val.
Yes, I thought the same thing.
It's like, you guys are co-workers who are very friendly, but is he your best friend? What about Val?
Yeah, she should have said he's one of my best friends.
Yes, yes. And then C.C. in a very funny moment learns that Niles has quit or been fired. And just they stylistically like darken the hallway she's in, and then shine like a singular spotlight on her as like an angelic choir plays behind her, and as if she's like finally free, and
she looks up at the heavens and goes, "Thank you."
Yes. And then we get like kind of the crux of the second half of the episode, which is Maxwell is like, Fran, you have to find a replacement. He goes, as the lady of the house, you must find a replacement, which I thought was really funny that he calls her the lady of the house.
Hey, I want to call myself the lady of the house.
You are.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to start calling Elizabeth the lady of the house. I'm sorry, the lady of the home is not here.
Kyle would probably call me the baby of the house because I don't do shit. He's like the whiny baby of the house. But so
well, that's Elizabeth. Yes. I mean, you know, she's still the lady.
Hey, she earns her keep. I don't. Then later that week, Fran's in the living room and Sylvia arrives and she's like, oh, like, Ma, what are you doing here? And Sylvia's like, oh, don't you remember? Like, we're going out to lunch with your Aunt Frida, who we've met several times before. We love Aunt Frida. Who's she played by again?
Lainey Kazan.
Lainey Kazan.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's very funny because Sylvia obviously has like a tense, like frenemy relation with Aunt Frida because it's her sister-in-law. And so Sylvia's in this incredibly gaudy leopard print dress and huge hair. And then Aunt Frida arrives and she's in an incredibly gaudy tiger print dress. And they have almost the exact same body. And you know, Aunt Frida sees Fran and it's like, Franny, and goes, mwah, mwah, like very warmly. And then she goes, Sylvia. And they're like, ma. Like it was very passive aggressive. And And the other thing that we know about Aunt Frida that we reiterate here is that, she's had 7 husbands and she's a millionaire because remember she married Bert. I think that was his name most recently. And I'm assuming he's dead now, even though he was not dead the last time we saw him. but so she's now, has hundreds of billions of dollars. And so Fran is like, Frida, maybe you could hire my friend Niles, since you have so much money now. And Frida's like, I do have all this lardo china that needs dusting. And Sylvia's like, it's pronounced Yadro. And Frida goes, you can pronounce it. I can afford it.
It's just such a good line. I love that line.
Yeah, shots fired.
Yep.
And so we kind of set that up, right? And then C.C. comes in and she's like, no need to worry, Nanny Fine. Like, I found a replacement butler. And she kind of gloats about this to Fran because in her mind, it's like, oh, like, I am really the lady of the house. I really found a replacement. And so like, this is going to definitely put me in Mr. Sheffield's good graces and like prove to him that I am the much better partner for him. And this just honestly leads to one of the funniest jokes of the episode because then Fran, who initially didn't think she'd be able to go out to lunch with Frida and Sylvia because she needed to find a replacement for Niles, is like, oh, well, I guess I can go with you after all. And Frida's like, I'm in the mood for Mexican. And Sylvia's like, but I want matzo balls. And then Fran goes, have you tried Casa de Hadassah? And then she goes, they have great tequila sunrise. They have a great tequila sunrise sunset.
It was like, such a good joke.
Yeah, I was literally like, zing, zing, zing.
Me too. I wrote it down. I was like, Casa Hesada is really, very, very funny.
And then the next day, we cut to C.C. giving this new butler a tour of the home. And first of all, the butler's name is Trevor, which I thought was a very strange choice for an old British man.
Dude, it was such a strange choice that I was like, why?
Why not like William or, you know, or Jeeves or something.
Yeah, Donald. Like they went with Trevor. Hey, bros, it's me, Trevor, your butler. That's what it sounds like.
I know. It like,
whoa.
Yeah, it really did throw me. And again, like a very small change could have made us be like literally not think anything.
Yes.
But he's super stuffy and he follows the rules and he has no sense of fun. He's just awful. And he like vocally disapproves of Fran's wardrobe. He's cold to the children. And at one point he even looks at them and he goes, why aren't your children in school? And Gracie's like, Fran's taking us to see the 80-pound baby on Maury Povich. And she's like, don't tell Dad, and tries to slip him some money. And then, she goes, Dad doesn't need to know. And then he goes, I cannot be bribed. And then Gracie just looks at Fran and goes, this one's going to be trouble.
So this guy, I looked him up. You know who this guy is? The butler? Okay. Do you remember the very famous scene from Ghostbusters where they go to the hotel and the hotel manager is like, there's a ghost upstairs. We must blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, that's the hotel manager is Trevor.
Fascinating.
Isn't that crazy? Like that's like I feel like that's such a recognizable scene from that movie, and he's so recognizable as that one little like side role.
Wow.
And then he he pops up here and there and stuff. He's still alive, this guy, I think.
Good for him.
Yeah. He's 200 years old.
God, you're only as old as you feel.
Chegou a melhor parte do podcast. É hora de provar a melhor Coca-Cola. A Coca-Cola sem açúcar. O sabor irresistível da Coca-Cola, sem açúcar e igualmente refrescante. Coca-Cola sem açúcar. A melhor escolha.
So we established that this butler, he just sucks. And he does not fit in with the family.
That's so funny. My note, I literally wrote, wow, new butler sucks.
But
then we cut to my favorite scene design of the whole series.
Oh, I wrote, cut to Frida's incredibly gaudy mansion. And I
wrote gaudy too. I was like, oh my God. Frida's gaudy ass house.
Well, it's in all caps in my notes. It says wall-to-wall pink, florals, wallpaper, little porcelain dogs. And it's like grandma chic puked everywhere.
Oh my God. It's so gross, this house. It's hilarious. Truly,
You know
truly
what?
like amazing production design right here.
My mother would love this. This is what her house would look like. I'm not kidding you. If she had a say. And although Frida goes, it took forever to cover up those carved mahogany walls. And she also is like, don't worry, I'm getting more furniture to fill the empty space. And there's literally not a single inch of empty space.
In this mansion. Like they show you a shot of the thing from the outside and it's like a bigger house than anyone needs to ever live in. And it's like covered. It's so good. This was such a funny reveal.
You know what? I kind of would like my house to be decorated like this, but it would be like kind of ironically, but I would still like it. But it would be grandma chic. I mean,
right.
It would be like a
kitsch chic.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would definitely use elements of this, but in a knowing way.
Yes. In a post-ironic hipster way.
Maybe, but partly also I do find it comforting because I did grow up with some of this aesthetic. Like obviously not on the scale of this money, but like, you know, again, this is how my mom like tried to make our house look.
Bananas.
And then
so go ahead. So we learn here like Fran walks into this house and Frida's like so happy to see her, and Fran is like come to get Niles back. Basically.
Yes. She's basically like, I want Niles back. You know, you can get anyone to do what he does for you. But then literally from the other room, we hear Niles call, Frida, it's booty time. And then he comes in wearing like nothing but a bathrobe. And we realize he's her boy toy to the point where she's even given him like a diamond pinky ring. And Fran's like, oh, Niles, you hussy. You even got a ring? And he goes, and diamonds here. And then he points to his mouth and she goes, and a dental plan. And then Frida like heads into the other room because she's like, I'm going to go draw a bath. And then we hear, and then as she leaves, she goes, don't be long, my little dancer. To Niles. Oh my God. And Fran's like, Niles, I can't believe you're running around the house in skimpy clothes, throwing yourself at your boss. It's sick. Which is very funny because that's obviously what she's been doing for 4 years.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, well, you know, it's the only way I can make your salary. I saw your credit card application. And she's like, what? Niles, no. That was like how I tell Mr. Sheffield I'm 29. I'm seeking approval. Which I thought was very funny because she's literally seeking a credit card approval, but also seeking society's approval as a woman. Correct. And she's like, I'm taking you home. And but like he refuses. He's like, no. It's too late. He's like, Frida's made her bed and I need to lie in it. Ugh. So good. He's basically he's
a gigolo.
He's a gigolo now.
He's a gigolo now. He was forced. It's very funny to me. And this shows just, you know, speaks to the purity of Elizabeth's heart. But we ended these 2 episodes and I was like, all right, well, I'm going to go do record now. I was like, I don't know, it shouldn't be that long. Like usually when when one episode's very silly, I have like less to say. And like that first episode was like pretty silly, but I really liked the second episode a lot. And Elizabeth just goes, I don't know, the second one made me feel weird. And I went, why? And she's like, because like I didn't like how little money Fran and Niles were making, and then I didn't like that like Niles was forced to be a gigolo. And I was like man, I didn't think of it that way, but good point. Like, he's so broken that he's forced to turn to selling his body.
It's true. But also, we have established on numerous occasions, and Fran has even owned up to this. Most of Mr. Sheffield's employees do very little and leech him dry. Like, remember when she was like, you're not going to fire anyone? The entire concept of firing is foreign to you. Look at who you have working for you. So like while I do agree, like in general, like the wealth inequity is a horrible problem, I think in this specific situation, like Mr. Sheffield's
been more than generous.
Yeah, he is also an idiot boob. Like they mostly just eat his food, hang out in his bathtub. But then, we established that Niles is refusing to come back, partly out of pride, partly because he does not feel like he's getting paid enough. And then we cut back to the mansion, and it is the day of Dr. Joyce Brothers' big visit. And Butler Trevor, which again does not work in any way.
And now segments.
Oh no!
What is that? How did that even get in there? We're trying to keep this at tight 35.
I uploaded it before and I hit it on accident just now. I was going to surprise you later.
You just keep cutting into my life. Oh, but okay. So then Butler Trevor said, this is how we know he's the worst. It's the day of Dr. Joyce's visit, and he goes to, he's sitting next to C.C. and he's like, I do hope he picks you. You're clearly the better choice. But then Fran descends the stairs dressed in a like Jackie O ensemble. And she gets down there, and then Sylvia descends the stairs, and she's like, Ma, what are you doing up there? How'd you even get in? And Sylvia looks at the butler and goes, Der Weiss Engel wouldn't let me in. And that, by the way, is the name of Laurence Olivier's character in The Marathon Man. And that character is modeled after an infamous Nazi doctor. And then she goes, the boy had to help me up the trellis. And so she climbed a trellis to get into the house. And then also the fact that she still refers to Brighton as the boy kills me.
Yeah.
The boy. And Brighton then hopples in after he clearly had to lift Sylvia up. And so this is all happening, and Joyce Brothers, she just got there, but all this other stuff is sort of happening at the same time, so she hasn't really
by the way, I really liked how they wrapped this episode up in one chaotic scene. I thought it was like really like a fun way to like handle all of these dangling threads. Cause like as we got to this scene, I was like, man, it's crazy that like this show opened with like, we're going to have Dr. Joyce Brothers, and then she doesn't show up till the end. And I'm like, there's like 50 plots. And then they wrap them all up in one scene. It was really great.
Yes. So then Sylvia came down the stairs, and Brighton hobbled in, and Joyce Brothers is there, but she's sort of like trying to figure out what's going on. And then Niles comes running in, and he goes, hide me, please. And Fran's like, oh, Niles, what's going on? And he goes, the jacuzzi I could take, even the full body massages, and I can suck on a big toe for hours. And he's like, but I will not do windows. And then we hear Frida calling from behind, Nilesy. And then he goes, oh God, Sasquatch. And everyone starts talking over each other. It's like a cacophony. Like everyone's like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then Mr. Sheffield, who was like clearly working in his office, comes in, and he's just like, Trevor, what the hell is going on in my house? Because he's so used to asking Niles this type of question, right? And Niles is like always in the know. And then Trevor goes, I don't know, sir. I make it a point not to involve myself in other people's business. And then Mr. Sheffield goes, well, a lot of good that does me. You're fired. Niles, you're hired. And he goes, do I get a raise? And he goes, no. And Niles goes, I'll take it. And then the audience cheers. I wish he had gotten a raise. I really do wish he.
Me too.
And I do wish that this episode had used this as an opportunity to sort of show how Mr. Sheffield like misses Niles and relies on him.
Instead of the episode vindicating Mr. Sheffield at the end, it would have been nice if the episode had vindicated Niles. And I think that would have made the ickiness of all of the rest of it. Like, if the episode had been more about Mr. Sheffield realizing like, oh, I had a great thing here, and I really was like kind of like taking him for granted. And then like the new butler comes in and everything falls apart. I think it would have been more satisfying to see Mr. Sheffield being like, you know, you can have your job back and a raise, and you know, and then Niles being like, I would love to, you know, like, I think.
Yes, I agree. It would have been way more satisfying and actually kind of heartwarming and funny at the same time.
Agreed.
And
they could have still had like all of the mishigas with Frida, like that all still could have happened, and it would have still been funny to have Niles be desperate to come back and Mr. Sheffield to be just as desperate to have him back, and then still gotten the same conclusion. But in this version, you're just like, Maxwell just comes in and he's like, "You're fired, you're rehired, you two get out of here." Like,
I mean, this could have actually sort of like, to play out the metaphor of them like being in a incredibly intertwined relationship, like a romance. This is the kind of thing where, like, you know, an officer and a gentleman, like Mr. Sheffield should have showed up to get his butler back, right?
Yes,
And you know, and Niles would have been like in a row being like, "What are you doing here?" And he'd be like, "I'm here to take you back." And he'd be like, "No," like you know, like almost like Niles feels trapped in Frida's house, and he get, you know, it would have, again, could have been very funny and also very, you know, three-dimensional.
But we do get a really funny scene here regardless. And he rehires Niles. And then Maxwell does sort of get his comeuppance because we still have to deal with Dr. Joyce Brothers, who is basically only here because Fran had promised that she would get her musical in front of Maxwell. And so she grabs him and pulls him aside and then very shamelessly not only pitches him the concept, but then starts singing some of the song from like the opening number. Yes.
She's like, opens on a schizophrenic prostitute. And she's just like, "I just stabbed a man." and I was like, you know, go Dr. Joyce. Like she really like gave it her all.
Yeah, she committed to the bit for the show. For she was like, "Oh, I'm going to be on The Nanny. I'm going to give the hardest performance I've ever given."
Yes. And then, so that's kind of, it's funny. He now has to listen to Dr. Joyce's horrible musical. And then the button on this episode, Niles opens Mr. Sheffield's office door thinking that the office is empty, and he is leading a tour. And he's like, "And this is where Jackie O first met Jack Kennedy." And then he doesn't realize that Mr. Sheffield's just napping on the couch, and he's just like, "Niles?" And Niles is like, "Tour's over, no refunds," and pushes them out the door. That was the episode. Yeah.
That was the episode. And now, I didn't mean to spoil it, but thanks to the strong arming of the corporate shrews at Zencastr, we are forced into a premium service of our podcasting little online studio. But it gives us the ability now, instead of me having to splice in songs after the fact, I can now introduce the segments theme and then do this. And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
That's the best.
I think I like last season more. This is very funny, man. But the last season pumped me up. It was like I would always be like dancing to it. But okay, favorite lines and moments. Okay. I loved the line, "I think you're paid quite well considering the fact that you drink my brandy, smoke my cigars, and give secret tours of the house claiming it belongs to Jackie Onassis." Casa de Hadassah was genius. Like it was bordering on Starship Enterprise.
Yes. And every once in a while you go like, man, could they have just done more of this with this show? And it would have been even better. I mean, because I love this show, but like, God, I wish there was just more, I guess, Yiddish puns.
I want to get a shirts that say "Welcome to the Starship Enterprise" with like Sylvia on it or something.
Well, now I want two shirts, right? I want "Welcome to the Starship Enterprise," and then I want a T-shirt with like a fake looking Taco Bell kind of building on it, and it says "Come eat." I ate at Casa Hadassah.
Yeah, Casa de Hadassah.
Yeah, Casa de Hadassah, and then on the back it says, "Try our tequila sunrise sunset."
So good. And then, okay, this is not a favorite line. I just flagged it to discuss. when Fran realizes that Niles is basically a gigolo now, he goes, "I'm shagadelic, baby." And I just wrote, do you think our younger viewers even have seen Austin Powers? Because
That's a good question.
because think about it, like if let's see, Austin Powers 1 came out. Oh my gosh, it came out in 97. So
Yeah.
how many years? So that's I'm so bad at mental. So that's 2007. So that's 25 years ago. If you're not like a big person who just watches tons of comedies that came out before you're born, this is like ancient history. Like if you were born in the year 2000, like would you have seen a movie that came out 3 years before you were born? Unless you're like, a huge movie person.
No, you probably wouldn't, especially because it's not like even by the time the third Austin Powers comes out, if you weren't born by the time the third one came out, right? Which at this point is still like 25 years ago. Why would you see those movies? It's not like it stayed in the zeitgeist. It's not like people are constantly referencing Austin Powers anymore. By the time the third movie came out, people were over it, So yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. I guess that's our question for the week. How many people in our audience understood the Austin Powers reference in this episode and have seen or know about Austin Powers?
This is what we'll say if you weren't around and like sort of sentient during that time. Because this was pre-streaming and when there was only a handful of movies that actually came out a year and that you went to the movie theater to see them, this like a movie could have so much cultural influence. Like Austin Powers quotes, they were on t-shirts, bags, like truly everywhere. Like quoting this movie happened for 2 years straight, where people would go like, yeah, baby.
Yeah. So much so that then it just became part of like pop culture lexicon for a while, to the point where even shows like this, like 3 years later, we're still just like, it's a funny punchline that everyone just knows.
This was the same year. This was the same year, 97.
Oh, it was. Okay, so they're playing directly off of like the initial explosion of people loving.
Yes. I mean, Austin I think Powers. Probably the one of the most famous lines is, "Do I make you horny? Do I make you randy?" And then also shagadelic, and also yeah, baby. Just the way he said it.
It all sounds insane out of context.
or I was thinking, throw me a frickin' bone, Scott. We just I can't believe how old we are now. But okay, what were your favorite lines and moments?
I mean, we had a lot of the same ones because I think the best lines in this episode were the best lines. Like it was hard not to like all of the best lines here. I loved Niles's like, someone wants to back your new show, and then Maxwell going like, "Oh, who?" And I was going like, it was, and then walking out. That was a very, very clever last laugh.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, we basically had all the same ones. I liked all of the I liked Trevor's delivery on everything too. I thought his delivery was great on basically every line they gave him.
And I guess to this guy's credit, I hated Trevor. Like,
that's what I mean. He was perfect. Like, I disliked him. He played that role perfectly. Like, he was just dislikable enough that it wasn't unbelievable that he would get hired, but it was believable that no one would like him other than C.C.
For Yiddish, we got Tukus, which is your butt. We got Mispuka, which is family. We got Schmuck, and then we had I think Frida calling Fran Franala, which is beloved little Fran. It was a nice episode with Yiddish.
Yes, it was. It was plump with Yiddish.
Turgid.
Turgid Yiddish.
Throbbing.
Okay. Oh no. Okay. All right.
So, then for Nanny Trivia, so we actually reached out to the fantastic Peter Mark Jacobson, who's been always so generous to us when we have questions about the show. And we had just asked for the Bobby Fleckman story, I think it was last week, how did the process go for actually using a character that was owned in another property, which was Spinal Tap. And it's actually exactly what you would expect. They just had to get approval from the studio, which produced Spinal Tap, which makes total sense. But, you know, I had kind of been wondering like, oh, do you have to ask Christopher Guest first? Did he own it? And I guess the reality is you don't actually ask the person who really created it because sadly they don't own it. The studio does.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think people often forget that like Hollywood is not a creator-owned like place. You know what I mean? Like creators get the credit, sure, and like studios typically don't take credit for things, but like you don't own anything. Like Hollywood owns all the, you know, the Warner Brothers owns every movie Warner Brothers puts out. It's not like they split ownership of this stuff. So yeah, it makes sense to me that they had to go to the production company or the studio or whoever owns Christopher Guest's movie and be like, hey, we want to use this. I mean, and obviously like Fran is beloved at this point in time. She's got a hit TV show. So them saying no was probably not very likely. I'm sure they were like, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And I think I can piggyback off this trivia. I can use the trivia that I was originally going to use last episode, but then when we pivoted to Chester trivia. So interesting thing, Fran Drescher has appeared in 2 films that have been selected for the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being, quote, culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Saturday Night Fever, 1977, and This Is Spinal Tap, 1984. Which, when you, I think that is so cool because while obviously Fran Drescher is very famous and beloved, I think people, myself included, like firmly think of her as like television star. So the fact that she kind of was then, her legacy was a part of not 1, but 2, like incredibly culturally and historically significant films is like, what a cool bit of trivia, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, look, the nanny was the biggest role that she had, certainly by like amount of screen time and then by just exposure level too, because of how big the show got. So I think people remember her for that because like that's what she was probably most known for. But it's super cool to think that like, yeah, and in the path to get there, she got herself cast in and ended up in 2 like nationally treasured films.
Yeah,
which is pretty amazing, like the odds of that, you know, like obviously like really talented people like working with really talented people, and she's obviously got an immense amount of talent, and you know, even in the small roles, you know, picked great projects and stood out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, because think about it, like there's plenty of other very, very famous sitcom stars that like don't have that kind of interesting like factoid, right? Like it's not like Jennifer Aniston appeared in like Boogie Nights and Silence of the Lambs, you know, like
she was in the Leprechaun movie.
Oh yeah, right. Leprechaun 2, I believe. And then so for
no, to be fair to Jennifer Aniston, it was the first Leprechaun movie.
Was it? No, I think it was Leprechaun. Oh, nope. Okay, you're right. Hey, much as you were wrong last week, you're right
this week. I'm right. I know. And weirdly enough, we're recording them both in the same day. So I feel nothing.
It just neutralized.
It just neutralized. I was feeling really bad. And then I got right, but that just makes me feel less bad. Not good.
And then for the Fran or the C.C, and again, in a very literal way, I related to C.C in that they're playing that she is just on this tremendous eating kick right now to explain her body changing. And I have been spiraling this week, let me tell you. I have been gobbling up whatever I could get my hands on. Sometimes it happens, you know, sometimes you yo-yo one way and then you're just like, for whatever reason, I will shove literally whatever's edible around me in my mouth.
It's so funny because that was what I basically was like, I mean, I guess this week I'm closest to CC because I'm on an actual diet, like because I'm on the opposite swing of where you are now, which was like, yeah, I spent the last couple months just eating anything that I could put into my face, and now I'm like, oh man, I like gained a bunch of weight back, and like I gotta I've been working out consistently, so like it crept up on me a little bit slower than normal. But yeah, I just been eating garbage, So,
yeah. And I think for me, sometimes it actually was an unfortunate irony in that I had it in my head last week, like, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to exercise. And then something about knowing that I'm like not supposed to do XYZ, it actually flips a switch in my head where it's all I want to do. So it backfired. And like literally I asked Kyle if we can make quote dessert popcorn the other night. And he's like, yeah, like you sit here, I'll go make it. And then I followed him into the kitchen like a dog, basically. And then he's like, you don't have to be in here. Like you can go sit. I'm like, no, and he was like, you really like, you need to eat this popcorn the second it's done, don't you? And I was like, yeah. It was so sick.
You needed your fix.
Yeah, he was like, you're kind of just like, you're almost like hunting. Like you're like just frenetically moving around this kitchen, like looking.
All right, well that's too deep a look into our sad lives. If you want to send your condolences to us, please reach out on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Oh Mr. Chef Pod, Gmail, Oh Mr. Sheffield Podcast @gmail.com. Go to the websites where you listen to the podcasts and rate and review and leave 5 stars and share the show. That really helps people find us, and we're in the home stretch. Final 2 seasons left. Let's go out with a big bang. And speaking of big bang, it's the end of our recording for the week, so I'm going to smash myself on the head and fall back into a coma until we have to record next week.
Just make sure you wake up on time this time. Last time you hit your so hard, you were out for an extra couple of days.
That's me have good no brain damage.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
I go, Miss Fine.